Welcome to the Stygian Stilettos Gamer channel. This is Stygian Sis. Please like, share, and subscribe, and find me at twitter.com/StygianSis. Hey everybody, how's it going? This is your girl Stygian Stilettos Gamer, aka Stygian Sis. I have with me Technobliterator from FFWiki. You want to go ahead and say hi to the people?
Hello.
Hello,
How's it
hello.
going, people? If you have any complaints about the FF7 coverage, it's probably because of me. I did most of it. Or like most of the new stuff anyway.
Alrighty, and then TifaTheMonk is also with us. How are you doing, Monk?
I'm doing great, and I'm really excited to talk about Tifa, as usual.
Wouldn't have guessed.
Like
Who is it?
two of my
Who
favorite
is it?
pastimes combined into one: reading and Tifa.
That's the way to go.
Mm.
All right, let me just introduce what's going on. So we started a Promise Under the Stars Final Fantasy VII book club. We will be going through Traces of Two Paths. Let me in fact put the graphic up while we're talking about it. So it's Promise Under the Stars Final Fantasy VII book club. It started last week, but this is our first week actually going through the pages. So we're going through pages 1 through 52. We're starting with Traces of Two Paths. After that, we'll be On the Way to a Smile, The Kids Are Alright, and then The Maiden Who Travels the Planet. And by the way, also, I want to note that the Tanabata and Nibelheim event that's going on, if you go to twitter.com/cloudy events, that starts on the 7th as well. So please don't miss out on that. Any type of fan art, fan fiction, anything you want to do. Of course, we take any contributions. All right. But yes, so we've decided to read through all of the first 3 books we have, which are the canon books, and then there's a short novel that what was it, commissioned out by Square Enix? Is that the situation, Monk? With Maiden. Monk, you there? Okay, I think it is. So
I'm sorry.
yeah, I was saying the first 3 books.
Hello?
Yeah, we're here. You're here. You're good. The first 3 books
Okay.
the first 3 books are written by Nojima, and then the 4th book is actually just a short novel that was commissioned out by Square Enix like 20 years ago or something like that. I just never read it, so I've been curious to read it, but it's not canon material, but it'd be interesting.
No, it's
Are
not.
we talking about
It's
Maiden?
not written by Kojima. It's written by Benny Matsuyama.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really up in the air as to whether that's canon or not.
To say the least.
Yeah, it's really up in the air because on the one hand, like, it's in an Ultimania, and the Ultimania is like the best source of canon. On the other hand, you know, they haven't really acknowledged it ever since it was released.
Exactly.
So,
and it has no.
Well, and considering the author himself acknowledges that it's not official and it's not connected to the official story, it's his own personal interpretation. I would take that as a pretty definitive statement as to its non-canonicity.
but it's still curious to read. I mean, I just as a little bonus for week 13 because it's only 20 pages, so I figured what the hell, read it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so let's.
And considering a large portion of the well, I wouldn't say a large portion of the fandom, but a significant chunk of the fandom tries to use it in arguments. It's always good to be knowledgeable on these sorts of things.
Yeah, and I love anything Final Fantasy VII, so I'm definitely.
Yeah, I mean, and
I'll read it.
Exactly. I've pretty much I'm obsessed with this game and all of its lore, and even the extended stuff. So even if it's not actually canon or associated with the direct canon, I will still look into it, or I'll play the game. Like I'll play spin-off games. Yeah. I'll look into the lore of spin-off games. I entered into this fandom through technically a spin-off game because I was a Kingdom Hearts fan first before I became a Final Fantasy.
Yeah, a lot of people.
So I entered the fandom through Kingdom Hearts.
A lot of people did, yeah. For me, like, Final Fantasy VII was actually the first one. It's how I got into it. And it was my cousin who got me into it. He grew up with this and Metal Gear Solid. He gave me both of them, so I was like, all right. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I just went down the rabbit hole from there, like completely.
A very long rabbit hole. Yeah, I've been in this, I don't
Yep.
know, 20 plus years. Yeah, I hear you. But all right, let's go ahead and get started. Hey, rolling on the floor. Hey, Zayana, thanks for joining. What we're gonna do? We're going through the first 50. I'm about to say chapters. No, we're not. First 50 pages. And I've made some notes, so let me grab those. Let's see. All right. Just check and make sure everything looks good. All right. So, Trace the Two
Should we
Paths.
give people an intro on this book? Oh, that's what you were about to do.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
I'm sorry. I just jumped the gun a little bit.
Yeah. So, Trace the Two Paths, written by Nojima, who is one of the developers of the series, has been there. I mean, pretty much since the beginning, right? I mean, he was there since the beginning, at least of 7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, if you mean 7 specifically, then yeah.
Yeah.
He wrote 7 originally as well.
Yes.
As for the series itself, I don't actually remember.
Yeah,
when
I don't
he
know
was-
how far back he goes, but I know he was there for 7. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I know that Nomura was literally just like, he literally just designed monsters for Final Fantasy V before all of a sudden working his way up to in 7 he was like massively involved with it.
yeah, I can see he is an amazing dev, so I can see how he got there.
Okay.
But
You
yeah.
know, people complain about him all the time, but that man has so many talents. Like, it's incredible.
Yeah, it really is. So Trace the Two Paths, canonically, what we're well, it is canon to remake specifically, and of course, I mean, it ties into the whole series, the whole compilation. It takes place a little bit after, from what I can tell, and I actually was going to go into this in the beginning. It seems like they're around Chocobo Sam's area initially, but by the time the book ends, they're on their way to Costa del Sol. Would you say
Yeah, that's for Tifa's part of the book. That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
For Aerith's part of the book, it's actually when they're on the cargo ship from Junon.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm thinking like, yeah, do you have that span of time? So it's a little bit between, but depending on where remake starts, let me put it that way. Because Chocobo Sam, I guess you go to after Calm. So it seems to be happening simultaneously with Rebirth. And basically, the first 200 pages is about Tifa's whole background right up until basically the game starts, and then the remaining pages are about Aerith's childhood, and they stop right before she meets Zack. So
Yeah,
the book
it's
ends.
super interesting because we had barely seen anything from that whole time period for Tifa. We had barely seen any of that before because. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's been depicted, like the Nibelheim incident has been depicted a tons of time. Like, there was the original game, obviously. There was the anime they released on it. There was Crisis Core. You know, there's just tons of different depictions on it. But this one, like, it definitively tells you what happens to her from that point up into the start of the game, which before was pretty vague.
Yes.
It was just... So, this happened to her. Zangan saved her. And then somewhere along the way, she ended up in Midgar, and somewhere along the way, she joined Barra, and blah, 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 blah. But now it tells you definitively, okay, this is when she went to Midgar. This is how she joined Barra. This is how she got, you know, Seventh Heaven set up, and etc. Like, you know, it fills in a lot of blanks.
Yeah. And
Aerith's part of the book is... Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I wanted to make one correction real quick. I accidentally said Chocobo Sam. Thank you, Roll on the Floor. I meant Chocobo Bill. I'm exhausted. I'm sorry. Chocobo Bill, obviously. Yeah, Chocobo Bill's part.
No, I understand getting them mixed up.
I'm playing this trading card game, and I was literally just looking at a picture of Chocobo Sam, so that's why he was on the brain. But anyway, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I thought Aerith's part of the book, like, we hadn't touched on her childhood a huge amount, but, you know, there was more of her childhood than there was of Tifa from the time of Zangan up into the start of the game. So Tifa's fills in, like, it adds more new stuff, I think is fair to say.
Yeah, you get a lot more details about Aerith's formative years, and both of their formative years, but it still is a bit, they still leave an air of mystery around a lot of stuff with Tifa and some things with Tifa before she leaves to Midgard. They seem to be a lot more detailed, but particularly because what I imagine is the live stream scene. Should we get it? Because we don't know, but I'm going to say if we get it, the live stream scene is going to fill in the rest of the blanks, because I feel if it is like Tifa, this part of Tifa's story inside of this book is the other side of what we're going to get from the live stream scene. So whereas we really haven't gotten much of anything about Cloud before, before the promise, we of course know about the Mount Nebel incident, but we don't know a lot about his, like, from his perspective those years. We don't really see a ton of that at all. So we're going to get a lot more of that, I'm thinking, later in the game. That's why they and plus there are things that Tifa just doesn't remember because she was in 2 comas and and she obviously doesn't know. Yeah, and she obviously doesn't know Cloud's side of it. She's not in Cloud's head, so she can't tell us his perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yeah, like there's the whole.
If you think about it, Tifa actually has. Think about it. Tifa has like a lot of holes in her memory.
Yeah.
Through, I mean, she's had multiple comas that she's been in, and she has huge chunks of her memory lost. I mean, if you think about it, that's probably a pretty big contributor to why she's so like unable to really confront Cloud about his own memories, because she's so uncertain about her own.
Mm-hmm. And understandably so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it doesn't mean that the memories she does has aren't incorrect. It's just there are blanks in her memory. Just to be clear, it's not that we can't trust what she says she remembers. The only reason the Nibelheim incident is that way is because she literally didn't know Cloud was there. He was hiding himself. So how could she know? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like there's this misconception that the live stream scene was just she'd been lying to him the whole time up until that point and withholding all this information up until the live stream scene, and if only she'd revealed it earlier, the whole game would have gone different. But actually, neither of them were clear on their memories up until that point. Like the point was they were both figuring it out, like they were both helping one another figure it out. And yeah, there's this whole misconception around that, which is, I understand why people think that, but
I kind of understand. I mean, if you played it once and weren't, I suppose if you played it once, it was 20 years ago. Yeah, I certainly could understand why you might have gotten that impression, but I think the information's out there if you want it. I mean, that's how I kind of feel about it. But yeah,
no, including on a certain website. I mean, you may have heard of it.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit involved in it.
But yeah, so let's go ahead and get started. So this starts, like I said, it looks like it starts in the grasslands, which I just did a quick Google search, and yeah, that looks like Chocobo Bill's area. And Tifa basically starts off in a conversation with Aerith. Made some notes. We'll go a piece at a time, and then I'll let you all respond and stuff. So first starts off with Aerith saying, she says, "Hey Tifa, you're used to this," said Aerith, pointing her finger toward the sweeping meadows of the grasslands. So, and I said this appears to be Bill's area, and what I like about this area, so eventually this gets to her talking about how she used to have these tea parties, because Aerith mentioned that she used to do picnics, and then so Aerith was curious and wanted to hear more about her friends and how she grew up in Nibelheim. One thing I like here is one of the lines says, "It hadn't been long since they met, yet Aerith felt like an old friend." They're really trying to drive home that they've had this fast friendship, and because this is in Tifa's perspective and in her head, there's no reason to lie to herself. Like, you can see there's no contention between these two girls, which I love. They seem to be genuine friends in Remake.
I love that.
With no hostility.
My favorite part, of Final Fantasy VII Remake, the characterization, my favorite part was their friendship. Absolutely. I mean, it's portrayed so well, and it's like you say, they're like a genuine friendship. Like, okay, you could argue, like in the original, there was a little bit of, fighting for over the romantic affection of Cloud to an extent, but even then they were still, like they weren't just rivals. They were still like, they genuinely like cared for one another. They were genuinely super close. Like, even in the original, it's a lot harder to see it. Like, but it's very much present in the original as well. So like, there are a couple moments you'd miss. Like in Junon, for instance, under Junon, like there's that one scene where like all the party members run off, right? And then you see those two go off to gossip to one another. It's just like this little thing that you probably wouldn't notice, but it shows that it was clearly always the intention. And then in Costa del Sol, if you don't have either of them in your party, why would you not have Tifa in your party? You're an idiot. But if you don't have Tifa in your party in Costa del Sol, and you don't have Aerith either, then they'll both talk to one another and be like, oh yeah, let's go hang out on the beach. And that's how you get the Hojo scene, is because, they've just decided, we're just going to have our own hot girl summer out on the beach in our, in our cool clothing because we don't have bikinis in 1997. But, yeah.
Yeah, I'm really curious if we're gonna get bikinis this time, but
oh yeah,
yeah, based on Wall Market, I mean anything's possible. I
well,
don't know.
yeah, well that, and also like even in like Icicle Inn, like you'd think she would have to like wear winter clothing for that, like because I would be freezing if I was in that costume over there, but
maybe she's hot blooded. Who knows? Monk, you got any thoughts about this particular section before we get into the nitty gritty about their friendship? I mean, if you don't, that's fine. Just wondering.
Yeah. Basically, I just would basically completely agree with Techno on this. Is that, yeah, that is one thing that I do feel was not handled very well in the OG. You're always told that what close friends Aerith and Tifa were, but aside from like maybe seeing them talking in Junon or seeing them talking in Cosmo Canyon, most of their dialogue was either kind of contentious or it just seemed like the more time was spent on, kind of this cattiness, which I didn't really like in the OG. I felt like there was too much of that in the OG. And I realized it was kind of a product of the times. It was, the 90s, and I guess Square Enix thought they were being edgelords by putting that in there. I don't know what was going on. But I didn't like it. Yeah. It's one thing from the OG that was definitely outdated and needed to go. Yeah. And I'm glad that they scrapped all of that. And instead actually made, put Aerith and Tifa's friendship to the forefront, which is where it needs to be.
Yeah.
Because how else are you going to endear us to these characters if you're going to have them, put contention to the forefront instead of their friendship? They're supposed to be a team. So, of course there is always going to be bickering on a team, like you see between Cloud and Barrett. But at the same time, there also needs to be moments of growth where you see them come closer together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the only component you're missing there is the translation for the original Final Fantasy VII wasn't that great. So I imagine when we get it in Ever Crisis, which as far as I can tell is using the original script, but they retranslated it, like the original Japanese script but retranslated, it might turn out that actually their dialogue wasn't intended to be as catty as it came across, and it wasn't intended intended to be like that, but just that because of however the translators did it, it just sort of ended up that way. It's the same deal with Barrett. He was when he was translated by obviously by white Europeans because of all the phonics in his dialogue.
It was a mess.
And ever since then, and ever since then they fixed it a lot because they realized okay, this is a little silly. So I imagine that's just another casualty of that where they might not have been intended to come across as catty as they did, but in reality it's how it's portrayed in Remake. You get occasional scenes where Tifa seems a little bit jealous. but for the most part, they still love one another, kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah, and I mean, that's even up to interpretation because depending on whether you're taking the Japanese or the English dialogue, it seems, like chapter 10, she's actually asking about, why is she helping us, as in, like, is she trustworthy? Is she knows something about Avalanche? The English makes it sound like she's asking if there's something going on between her and, Aerith and Cloud. Yeah, so even then, it's like, yeah, but it's still way better than than OG for me. So yeah, that's why I definitely like that aspect. And that they pointed that out. And I mean, in fact, that's what I didn't mention with Trace of Two Paths. The whole premise is these two girls are talking to one another, sharing their life stories. So but now it's important to say Tifa's not saying all this stuff out loud to Aerith, because it's not just Aerith in the conversation, Red 13, and then Barrett comes in. She's not telling them the stuff that we're about to come up with as far as Cloud. I don't think she mentions Cloud as far as a lot of this stuff, but she does in one part. So let's see. So yeah, she asked
It was
about
sort of nice for Kojima to decide, like, these were the two most popular characters from this game. Let's write a whole book about them. Like,
yeah, and right in the middle of remake, and then was it Toriyama that said it was the backbone of the series? I mean, that's very important. They had enough going on, but for him to think it was important enough to write this story, that says a lot. So they start going into the history of Nibelheim, how Shinra, let's see, not long after Shinra, in search of a base for his cutting-edge research away from any possible interference of the Republic of Junon, sets its sights on this land. That's where the Shinra Mansion comes in. Eventually, you have villagers. They talk about how Tifa's family ends up there. And she starts talking about the 4 boys that she hung out with. And Aerith says, shouldn't there have been 5? 5 of you if there are 4 boys, because she was thinking Cloud. And she said, well, one of them was Cloud. I wish he would just turn us down, but most of the time he'd ignore us, which led to so many fights. They thought he was a really strange kid, that he was dangerous. Yes, it was that young Cloud Strife who would march on ahead of them as if he was the one in charge. So this isn't, to me, this isn't her saying how she felt about it. I think she's analyzing the situation, like, the way that Cloud handled it led to fights, because later on she talks about this too, and she speculates, were the boys the reason that Cloud stopped coming around? That comes in later here. So then after that, mentions that of course her mom died, and then it mentions that the women of the village, she died of illness. Of course, they never specify what illness, but she's gone. The women of the village gladly step in to help. So, all the women of the village, I'm sure, including Claudia, help her learn how to sew and stuff, because it's a traditional village. The men go out to do the working, the women stay in the house, cook, clean, all that. Yeah, just a traditional place.
We finally got a name for Tifa's mother from this book as well.
Yes, Thea. Yeah, Thea is her name. Brian, of course, is her father's name. And
yeah, it's a very nice name.
Let's see.
Like, technically, we had names for Claudia and Brian Lockhart. Like, we had names for them for a long time, but, like, they were never listed outside of the concept art, whereas 7R confirmed, oh, okay, this is what they're called.
Yeah.
Like, we may as well use these names.
Yeah, exactly. And, we still don't have a name for Cloud's dad, but, I don't know if they ever intend to address Cloud's dad in Remake, specifically. I'm hoping they do.
He was just like he was like Anakin Skywalker. He didn't have a dad. He was just they decided he was a Christ-like figure, so he doesn't have a dad.
Yeah, of course, yes. All right, and so as far as Nojima sets out, and Monk may have something to say about this. Nojima sets out to dispel a lot of, I'll call them misconceptions, misconceptions about Tifa and her relationship to Cloud in these early days, because one thing, like I briefly mentioned, she says that Cloud is the one, he would be around, but he would ignore them. He wouldn't just say, oh, hey, I no thanks, I don't want to play. Like, Cloud is the one distancing himself, and this actually ties into an article that came out on Friday, because, there are a lot of parallels between Chapter 3 and Nibelheim. You know, Tifa's the most popular girl. Everybody, you know, all the guys are jealous of Cloud because like, oh, one of them was like, oh, he got to grow up next to that, next to Tifa Lockhart, that son of a bitch, or something like that. I mean, the NPCs are not happy with Cloud. Okay, and it mentioned that there was a loneliness that Cloud was feeling because of Avalanche, but it shows that Avalanche, even though they don't treat him the way Emilio and the boys treated Cloud in Nibelheim, Cloud was the one distancing himself from chapter 1 from that group. I mean, he said over and over, I don't care about this cause, this is a one-time gig, I don't want to deal with this. He's only there just because Tifa asked him, and then he's like, yeah, I'm done with this after that. So I
pretty
like
much. I mean, they weren't even paying him that well. Like,
no!
they weren't paying him that well. And he, like, you know, he didn't, like, actually care about the cause whatsoever. Although, I mean, like, he says he doesn't care about the cause, but we know he's a big softie. So,
yeah.
like,
yeah, and you know,
I mean,
and Soldier Cloud tries to act like a tough guy too, you know. So I mean, it's also part of his false persona. I mean, this company ruined his life. It really didn't make sense that he wouldn't care, but you know,
yeah.
who knows what's going on in his head.
One of the things I'm most embarrassed about is that, like, I didn't really fully appreciate how well Cloud was written until 7 Remake, right? Because I liked Cloud in the original, but I wouldn't have even put him in, like, my top 5, right? But then in 7 Remake, you know, just the way he's, you know, the way he's portrayed, and, you know, like, you see, like, a lot of the, you know, it's partly the voice acting, but also, like, the animations and stuff just make it, like, so much clearer how his character was actually meant to be portrayed, you know? Like, he wasn't meant to be a dick, he was just meant to be kind of dorky, you know? And so you see that, like, you can just see that part of him, like, a lot clearer, you know, the fact that he's, like, obviously missing a few years of his life. He's obviously only got the maturity of the 16-year-old, but he's in a 22-year-old's body.
21, yeah.
Effectively, you know? Yeah, 21, you're right.
Yeah.
I should have known that.
Oh no, you're good. You're good. I just called Chocobo Bill Chocobo Sam, so don't worry about it.
Yeah. But you didn't spend like 2 weeks writing an article about Cloud Strife.
Oh, you don't know that. Just kidding.
But anyway, so it just becomes so much clearer, like with 7R with that portrayal. So he became one of my favorites when before he was only like I liked him, but I didn't like him as much as I did. Anyway, that was a whole ass tangent. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're good. Monk, you got anything on this? Monk, you there? Okay, if she comes in, we'll. All right. Let's see. Okay, so. Yeah, and
about your Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, I was just saying that to go back to your previous point about Nojima basically just going through and clarifying a lot of the misconceptions about Cloud and Tifa's childhood, and you know, not only the way that they interacted as children, but the fact that, you know, there was a point in time in their childhood where they did play often together. He kind of distanced himself over time, but back when her mother was still alive, they used to play together, from the impression I got from reading the book, almost daily, because they lived right next to each other. So when they were quite young, they played together pretty often.
I mean, and it would make sense because, I mean, why would they leave an impression? Yeah. I mean, simply living next door to somebody. I live next door to people right now. I'm not falling in love with them. So there's got to be some, they had to have some roots. Yeah.
So this whole narrative that they were never close, I know that is some kind of the impression that you get from playing the OG. But, because during the live stream scene, Tifa says, well, it's true we weren't that close, but there was a time when they were close.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of, I think Nojima is going through and he's kind of giving us a clearer idea as to just how close they were, what exactly happened over their childhood, and what was the nature of really not only Tifa's feelings towards Cloud, but Cloud's feelings towards Tifa. And this book is very revealing,
Yeah.
especially once we get into some of the later parts of, this particular section that we're reading. Once we get closer to like the promise scene and everything, it becomes very clear as to what exactly the nature of their relationship is.
Yeah, and like I said with the boys, they also we're coming up to the part where it says, um, let's see. Now, one note before we get to that, there's a part because I'd always wondered how Claudia was treated for being a single mom in this village, and there's a couple parts that kind of lean towards what I thought that maybe people kind of, I don't know, look down on her or whatever. I didn't know what impression was, but there's a line that says there was a tendency for people to think that a woman's happiness depended on the man she would spend her life with. Well, we know, of course, she was a single mother for most of that time. I think Cloud was, as they put it, barely walking when his dad, quote unquote, died, which I'll never believe. But but we'll get to that. Okay, so and then despite the weariness, she felt over. Okay, so then they start going into how Tifa, when she gets around 10, the boys that she hangs out with are starting to look at her differently, and she notices that they're not looking at her as a friend anymore. They're looking for a possible future romantic partner. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're looking at.
That's the experience of a lot of women going through puberty. That's kind of what happens.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, we're talking about a village in the middle of nowhere. Who knows what the marrying age even is? Could be 15, 16. So I mean, maybe they're seeing a very.
Well, I mean,
I don't know.
And also, we're talking about Tifa Lockhart here too. Yeah. It was only natural that once she started developing, it was going to be quite happy.
Yeah. And
in Japanese culture, it's actually the marrying age can be as young as 13.
Mm-hmm.
So like, there's this one line actually in Final Fantasy VI about that like, when they translated it, they had a lot of problems because like there's a character who's 10 years old, and then in the Japanese translation, Edgar like says, "Oh, that would be criminal," to this 10-year-old girl, right? And in the Japanese translation, you look at that as like, okay, that's a little creepy, but you'd almost look at it as like almost trying to date a 17-year-old. It's like, it's bad, but I'd understand, you're only a year up. Whereas for us, we'd look at us like, what the fuck is this little pedophile saying? So obviously, when they translated it in English, the first time they got it right. Then when they did the GBA translation, they got it wrong again. And now in the latest translation, they had to fix it again because it's like, we don't.
I haven't played 6 yet, so I don't know, and I'm not familiar with that aspect. I just know that it's it's certainly Oh, you're good. It certainly wouldn't just be Japan. I mean, I live in a state where child brides are still so this is kind of a world round thing. It just depends on the times and stuff like that. That's all.
What state do you live in, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, I'm in Tennessee. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm not too far from you then. I'm in Texas.
Oh, cool. I just assumed you were in Europe.
I didn't. No. I understand from the accent. I'm from England, but I live in Texas now.
Oh, cool. Okay. All right, and then so where was I? Okay, now we're starting getting into yeah. So she's dodging their advances, and then they get into which is a little bit of a before crisis lore. Maru the cat comes into play. And she got the cat.
Yeah, we got a name for the cat.
Mm-hmm.
We were able to rename the article from Tifa's cat to Maru. I was like, yes. I always love when they give us, like, it's such a silly thing, but I always love when they name things that were previously unnamed, because it's like, oh man, it's so much easier to write the page now.
Yes, absolutely. And so what you find out is this cat runs away all the time, apparently. And and Cloud
happening before Crisis. Gotta keep continuing with that.
Yep. And what happens is the entire village is looking for this cat. Tifa just got over a fever, so she's not up and about yet. But when she's about to go out, she recovers, and when she's about to go out and try to find her cat, Claudia Strife shows up to her door and hands her the cat and says, "Yeah, Cloud found it yesterday, but he wouldn't come over here." So, which you know,
he's a little too shy for that.
yeah, you could tell like
It's
run.
like when you're. It's like when you're at a bar and you see this really hot girl and you're like, man, I'm too hot. I'm too shy to hit on her. So you just like tell the bartender, like, you know, put her on a tap. Here's my card. You know, just tell her it was me.
Yeah, or like send a drink over or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Except Cloud's a dork, so he sends a cat over instead. You know.
Yeah.
And
I just kind of wonder what that was like, because we know that Cloud doesn't get along very well with cats, candidly speaking. So, what was that like, him sitting there babysitting Tifa's cat for like the whole day?
I know, and I mean, and what was it like? He had to actually catch that cat. I mean, you're talking about an 11-year-old. I mean, a 13-year-old. Yeah.
I wonder if he was starting to get like some kind of like flashbacks when he was chasing Betty's cats in chapter 3, and he's like, "This sucks." I wonder if he was like getting like flashbacks of like, "Oh God, this is like when I was chasing down Tifa's cat."
It absolutely has to be a reference. Though Tifa says, "I know someone who can help you with that." Look, why would she think Cloud is like the perfect person to catch a cat? I mean, that's a clear reference to.
And you know what's so funny is that all 3 of Betty's cats are like. They are all, of course, white cats like Maru.
Yeah, that is not a coincidence.
So there's like references all throughout this thing. It's just crazy and honestly brilliant the way they worked everything in together, so that everything is linked.
Absolutely. And so yes,
there's all these little like breadcrumbs and all these little references and Easter eggs throughout the game that you won't even necessarily pick up the first time playing it, but once you like know all the background information and you go back and play it again, you're like, oh, now I know what that means, and oh, so that's what this dialogue means.
Everything, a lot of stuff had a different meaning, particularly between in chapter 8 and interactions between Cloud and Tifa, having this background, having this story in the back of your mind, because of course it came out a year after Remake did. And so going back and playing it again, it was cool to pick up all the little references.
Sorry, you say chapter 8? That was Cloud and Aerith.
Chapter 3.
Oh, I got you.
I might have accidentally said it, but I meant 3.
They're basically the same chapter, just swap the girl.
Yeah, but not really, but okay. That's funny. So then it goes into, let's see. This is where she starts thinking of Midgar's arrival. All the boys are talking about their dreams. They're about to go off, you know, and fulfill their dreams in Midgar. She starts wanting to wear the latest stuff in Nibelheim. I'm sorry, in Midgar, the latest fashions in Midgar. She starts learning how to bake sweets. And she says, up until then, I don't think I'd ever tried to get any boys' attention. Now she sees herself in competition with the city of Midgar because it's taking all the people she cares about away. So this eventually leads to, and then Barrett makes a comment, making Midgar your rival, eh? I like that about you, Tifa. Barrett says to her, he now has joined in the conversation. And,
yeah, it's a fun way of looking at it, really. Like, yeah, it's a fun way of looking at it.
And then this is around the time she's about to bake a cake. I forget the exact occasion, but she's about to bake a cake. And Cloud, so this is the exchange. She's walking, and she turns around. She feels a presence. She turns around, and Cloud's standing right there. And she says he said something, but Tifa couldn't hear it. She tilted her head to the side. The motion caused Cloud to dash over toward her, and she instinctively prepared to flee. He stopped just as he was about to bump into her and blurted out "midnight" at the water tower. She says, "Okay." And then they both just start darting off in different directions, trying to get away from each other.
Like, that is super cartoonish, you know. I get, like, being shy around a girl you really like, but then there's that. Like,
hilarious, yes. And what's funny,
like, no one does that, man. Come on.
And what's funny is
also, I don't know. She hadn't started practicing martial arts yet, right?
It's a little later than this. It's a little bit after this.
Right, that's what I thought. So she would have been terrified.
And what's funny is Nagisa, one of our friends, said they live next door to each other, so where were they running to? Like, if they're both running away from each other, how are they doing that if they live next door to each other? It's hilarious. But yeah, so then that's when he asked her out to the water tower, and she finds out about, she finds out that Cloud is going off. And actually, this is an important part, and then we'll keep on along. So
yeah, we're not good. We're not just gonna graze past this part, Stygian. This is the good stuff.
okay, so it says when she starts trying to remember why they stopped hanging out in the first place. So this is an excerpt from that. When they were young, I don't know if I have it here. I guess I could just put my notes over here so y'all are following along with me. There we go. When they were younger, she and Cloud used to play together a lot. Their houses were right next to each other, and it was easy to go back and forth. So this is what Monk was talking about. They did play together a lot, so until he was about 7 or 8. Hey, Triple Rhyme, how you doing? What's up, rolling on the floor? Yeah, as Rolling on the Floor said, Tifa doesn't learn about the martial arts until right after the promise scene. Yeah,
Yeah.
Cloud is gone when she learns how to do martial arts. But yes, and then this is Thea talking. Cloud has such a beautiful face. Her mother once complimented him at the dining table. Did that happen when she was 7 or was it 8? For some reason, that compliment made her feel happy and a bit shy. And then, of course, Brian gets mad about it. And so I think what's going on here, just to pause it for a moment, I think what's going on here, she's remembering back. She clearly has already had feelings for Cloud. They haven't really talked in years. They talk occasionally. They pass by each other. It's particularly about the cat. There's an exchange they have about the cat. But they really haven't been, these are the moments they really haven't been close. But when he asked her to the water tower, what she knows is the date spot in Nibelheim. You know, her heart's pounding. She's like, like, oh my God, what do I wear? What I do? What am I going to say to him? Is this she's having all these moments, and she's thinking about on her mom's words, and she's trying to, okay, yeah, let me read this part, and then y'all can comment. Yes, the reason why her heart was racing now was because Cloud was unreachable, a thing of beauty like the stars. So she's trying to figure out why she likes him, and she realizes that she sees him as unreachable. She likes him, but she sees him as unreachable. So it's kind of like, I don't know. I don't know. I kind of get what she's saying. I mean, Cloud has like I said, Cloud is distancing himself from her, so she doesn't know what that's about. And then suddenly he's asking on a date. She don't know what to think. Her mind's just all over the place. Then it goes into the things Cloud. So they get to the water tower. It explains how she got to the water tower. And this is the part where they mentioned she fell in love. So the things Cloud told her at the water tower were nothing extraordinary. He told her he was going to leave town when spring came. That he was different from everyone else. All the boys said the same thing to her in the end. But even so, she wasn't disappointed. Was it due to some sort of spell cast on her the night of the stars falling down? Or was it perhaps the sight of Cloud seeming slightly enthusiastic that she found so endearing? That promise she suggested they make was just a simple idea. So this, as we all kind of suspected, she kind of came up with that promise on the fly, it seems, some way to tether herself to Cloud. And she says, hey, promise me something. When you become famous, and if I'm ever trapped or in trouble, promise you'll come and save me. Just a simple idea, yet the moment they exchanged words, it became an irreplaceable promise. And it was that night that she also made that night also made her see Cloud, whom she adored, as an ordinary boy. Tifa fell in love with Cloud. It was the kind of love where she wanted to be with him. That was how she felt. So, of course, I mean, dropping this in the middle of remakes, confirming Tifa fell in love with him at that water tower. Considering how much they emphasize this water tower scene, even in this SE Cafe. I mean, it's one of the most important scenes of the game, and it's one of Cloud's memories that is, at least as far as we know right now, untouched by Genova's influence. So it's a very important scene. If whoever wants to go first, if you want to talk.
I'll talk.
Yeah, I think. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna throw this little thought out there, and then I'll let you take over. Because once I get going on this subject, I won't shut up for the next half hour. So, but I'm just gonna get this little thought out. It's just very interesting that how important this the scene at the water tower is, because not only does it go into Tifa's thoughts, oftentimes the talking point is made where people will say, oh, well, Tifa was only interested in Cloud because he said he was going to go and join Soldier, when very little emphasis is placed on it. Because keep in mind, this book is written from her point of view. And she almost glosses over the fact that he says he's going to join Soldier. She's like almost not even paying attention to that. She says, oh, I've heard this speech before. All the boys have been saying, oh, they're all going to leave town. They're all going to go off and make big heroes of themselves. The thing that she clings onto is the fact that he is so ordinary. Like, he's just a regular boy.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what makes her fall in love with him, is the fact that, up until this time, she thought he was unreachable, unattainable. And now, up there on that water tower, she realizes, oh, he's just a regular guy. Maybe he's not so unobtainable.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I do actually stand a chance with him.
Yeah.
And that's what endears him to her.
Yeah.
It's the fact that he is just a regular guy.
Yeah, and that actually reminds me. Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Go and finish your thought.
And just one more neat little thing. Of course, it's not mentioned here because this is, of course, from Cloud's point of view. But if you go to the Crisis Core Ultimania, it describes that this night at the water tower is when Cloud falls for Tifa too. So this moment at the water tower is a moment where they both fall in love with each other. Like, obviously they had an attraction to each other before that moment, but it's that moment at the water tower where I think you kind of cross over the line into, yes, they actually love each other.
Yeah, I think I know what you might be talking about. I might have that. But yeah, Drew, if you have something, you can go ahead. The only thing I was going to say is there is a deleted scene. Not that I take deleted scene. I mean, if it didn't make it into the game, but it just adds to what it would have added this context in OG, and it's a shame it wasn't in there because the deleted scene, they're talking about why he joined Soldier, and he said he was ashamed, or why he hid the fact that he wasn't a soldier. Why did he hide himself in Nibelheim? And he said he was ashamed, blah, blah, blah. And she said, I wouldn't have cared if you didn't make it into Soldier, as long as, if you tried your hardest, that's all that counts. That would have been very nice to have in OG in the first place. But yeah. If you got any, you can say something, whatever you want to do, Drew. I mean, not Drew. I keep calling Drew. I'm sorry, Drew. Joe. Another person, Drew.
No, it's no worries. Yeah, no, the one thing that stuck out to me was the fact that Thea almost, like, is kind of prodding Tifa
yeah.
to, like, kind of deal with him. Mothers do that all the time, where they're like, oh, that guy you brought over, you should, maybe have a thing for one another. But, like, it's interesting to me that Thea does that, whereas Claudia almost does the opposite with Cloud, because Claudia has that pep talk where she's like, oh, you need someone who's older and more mature than you. And, I mean, technically, Cloud is missing 5 years of his life, so Tifa is,
in a sense,
from
more
that
mature.
Yeah, she's definitely more mature, but she is a year younger than him. So it's interesting that the two mothers are kind of, like, have the opposite opinion there, really. Even though, like, there aren't any girls that Cloud has an option with that are actually older than him.
Yeah.
Like, all three of them.
Well, that's been a long contended translation because we've been told that the line she uses could mean older type, like older sister type, mature, not literal age. So then that would make sense, and that actually comes up later in the book. We don't get to that part, but that is touched on in this book. So in a roundabout way, but it's later on. It's not in these pages. Yeah. But yeah, I'm glad you brought that up.
I just thought it was an interesting dynamic where, like, one mother is saying, you should totally bang that guy, and the other one's saying, maybe someone older.
All right, so I think that's what I got. And then the rest of it, let's see. Oh, I was just making notes. Oh, yeah, so when we get into... So now they've shown she's in, they've shown her side, she's in love. And then soon after that, Cloud leaves. He has to leave in the middle of the night because there was some kind of scheduling issue, and they never got to say goodbye. She says, she never even got to hug him, which I thought was really sweet because in chapter 14, she gets to hug him. But yeah, she said she never even got a hug, and she cried. And then Midgard Blues, the song that is at the beginning of the Material Ultimania and that you hear in chapter 9. I mean, one day, if you look at the lyrics, if you haven't already, I mean, the lyrics are pretty spot on to talking about like what happened between, Cloud when he was leaving for Midgard, and the looking at the stars at night and all that. Yeah, it is very heavily cloudy coded. So, and it says that he cried as well. So,
yeah, the Cloud and Tifa hug. Oh my god, like that made me cry, dead ass. It takes a lot to get me to cry at a video game of all things. That made me cry.
yeah.
Britt Baron killed it, man.
Oh man,
Like,
I was like, Cloud, you fool, hug her.
yeah, I remember I got to ask her about it, and then like I said, like that must have been so hard to record because you did it so well, and she was just like, it wasn't difficult. I just cried into a mic, and then they just caught it. Like it's just that like she killed that performance, man.
Yeah.
She really did. I mean, all of them did, but
Mm-hmm.
Britt Baron just has a special place in my heart because we didn't deserve a Tifa to be that good.
Oh yeah, I was very pleasantly surprised, and no knock to her previous, but I mean Britt Baron at all. I mean, I'm just saying for me, Cody and Britt, they are Cloud and Tifa, and I would even say that for Aerith's voice actor. I really like her as Aerith personally. Everybody's gonna have their different opinions. That's just mine, So then
I love John Wright as well. I love John Eric Bentley.
Oh my God, yes.
I mean, John Eric Bentley, man. I mean, we don't deserve a Barrett that good either.
Yeah.
But...
yeah, he was amazing. Cool guy,
yeah,
too.
he really...
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so any final thoughts before we finish? We're in the second half of the 25 pages, but this will go a little bit fast just because there were a lot of pages that were just simply about Zangan teaching her techniques, nothing we need to really go through. So I just kind of got the highlights for the remainder, things that stuck out to me. Monk, you good? Or you have any final thoughts?
Sorry.
Yo, you good?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, I'm ready to proceed on to the next part.
Okay, cool. All right, so one small thing at the beginning of the, around page 25, she starts spending more time by herself after Cloud leaves. All the boys have left. She's kind of grown used to a bit of solitude that she isn't used to. She's used to having people around all the time. And she says she never knew the world could be so peaceful, which made her realize that maybe this was what Cloud liked. Maybe he liked being by himself, and being alone didn't make him feel lonely. And who was she to decide that he was ever unhappy? She was ashamed of those arrogant thoughts. And she also says, and let's see. Yeah, so she basically comes to realize that just because Cloud chose to live his life a different way doesn't mean that it's wrong per se. I mean, it's sort of and she says that she's lived her life the opposite, and it basically has been, a cause of stress, because if you're always trying to please everybody around you type thing. Whereas Cloud is just simply not going to be bothered with things he doesn't want to do. That's why she puts it. But I like that she sees that, like, she, even at her young age, she sees, because she really does know Cloud, and she doesn't see that as a negative or something that needs to be changed about him. There are things, she helps him along to better his life, improve himself, learn to make friends, because you do need connections in life. But she doesn't feel the need to turn him into somebody he's not, turn him into an extrovert, or have him, he's got to be running around partying all the time. Like, she learns to work with Cloud as he is. So I like that. That's why she's a good, like we said, she being the more mature side of the friendship as it is right now, in Remake, helping him, because if you look at chapter 3, she's helping him build a life for himself. She's getting him connections, she's getting him jobs, she's got him apartment, she's teaching him how to survive and how to thrive, and she's making sure that he doesn't have to endure what she did when she first got to Midgard. So, yeah, just very good character. Love her. Then it starts going into, this is where she meets Zangan. So she sees Zangan hanging in a river and thinking he's about to get swept away. Reminds her of when Emilio almost drowned. But he's fine. He's showing her a technique that he's doing. And then she shakes his hand. And by the way, his name apparently is Rosha, even though Peko, who by the way did the translations, thank you. Peko said that the name kind of could translate to 3 different things, but this is what she went with. So we're just gonna say Rosha for now, Zangan. And she shook his hand, and he was like evaluating her. And at first, she was like, "Why is he doing that?" Like, I mean, she was kind of freaked out as she ran off because this grown man is like, "Oh, you got nice calves," and she don't realize he's a martial artist. He's just some perv just came up to her, so she runs off. But then it turns out that he's a master martial artist, and he starts giving the whole village exercises to do, and she suddenly starts feeling, well, what's funny is she starts getting a little competitive about it. She wants to be able to do everything he's doing. And then, but she also starts to suspect he might be a slave trader. Like maybe he's looking for the strongest kids in the village or something. and then the adults start thinking he's a spy because he starts saying all this negative stuff towards Shinra. So now the village is suspicious of him. But him and Tifa eventually talk, and he asks her to be his disciple. And so that's how, and gives her this book that he says is a secret book. You can't show it to anybody. You can't tell anybody what's in it. And this is what you need to practice from. But he then leaves town for a while, and leaves her with that book of techniques, whatever may be in there. Any thoughts on any of that? I just can't believe they thought he was a slave trader. I'm like, dang, like they just went there.
I've always been fascinated by Zangan, and like he's one of the characters I've always wanted to learn more about, because like Zangan is basically like Zangan is to Tifa what Duncan was to Sabin in Final Fantasy VI. That's the martial artist trainer where she gets she basically got all of her techniques from. And I've always monks are my favorite class, by far. Like whatever, I don't care which Final Fantasy is. If there's a monk character in it, that's gonna be my favorite one to play. Mm-hmm. So it's Sabin in 6, and it's Tifa in 7, and in 5 I always give everyone the monk class because it's the best one. But it's just the best. It's just the best one. So I've always just been fascinated by Zangan, and I really hope we see more of him in the Nibelheim flashback next. Yeah, someone's in the chat said he looks like Sabin as well. And he does a lot. They do have a hell of a lot in common physically. So yeah, I mean, I was always fascinated by Zangan. Can't wait to see more of him in Remake. Hope you see more of him. I would deadass just get an integrate style chapter just about Tifa during this time, where she's learning from Zangan's techniques, and you get to play as Zangan as well. I would play it.
I would really love, I've been saying this for years, I would really love to see I guess a year, maybe, I don't know, maybe longer. I'd really love her to run back into Zangan at some point, and they do a master student duel, so he can see how far she's become in her skills. That would be freaking awesome.
That could be her side quest.
Yeah.
That could be her side quest. Because the other characters, each got their own side quests, except, Aerith didn't and Tifa didn't.
Yeah.
She could get a side quest where she runs into Zangan again. Mm-hmm. That would be fun as hell.
Yeah, something not quite akin to what Yuffie did, because she did a whole tournament, but you know what I mean. It'd just be Zangan. She'd run into him, catch up. He challenge her to a battle. I mean, we've all seen that movie, you know what I mean? But it would be cool. It would be cool.
Yeah, we could have him suplex Midgard Zolom or something stupid like that. That'd be fun.
I am still not over. I'm still not over those Final Fantasy 6 characters outrunning that train.
Oh yeah, and then suplexing it, like.
That is
But
crazy.
for all the people who say Sabin's better than Tifa, and I love Sabin, but Sabin can suplex a train. Tifa can suplex a giant robot with one hand
Mm-hmm.
while spinning it over her head. So
Yeah.
she kind of beat you on that.
And somebody said, yeah, Zangan was being a creeper. It didn't. Red Flare said it didn't paint him in a good light. It was a very curious way to bring him into, but it kind of reminds me of something that comes in a little later. So what happens next is he says Zangan eventually, let's see, compiling book of ethics. Okay. And then he says, and when you become an adult, I'm sure you'll be a splendid martial artist. Okay. He leaves. Later, he comes back, and he has her going through all the stuff that she learned in the book. He's correcting her as she's going, and then he starts bringing up her weaknesses. She's like, what weakness is that? And he says, you yourself, your own weakness. Now that you're in an age where you have some knowledge of yourself, let's see, for example, what if you were to think to yourself, I hate my father and grown-ups, and my friends make me mad too. Why can't they understand me? I'm special. So naturally they should know how I feel. You may begin to look down on everyone around you. And she's silent, and then he goes on to say, before placing others beneath you, it's important to know yourself first. The best way of training in hand-to-hand combat is to face yourself, because how can one place value on someone else without even knowing oneself? So he's not that he's saying necessarily definitively that Tifa's an arrogant person or anything like that. I think he's just evaluating the hubris of youth to some degree. I'm trying to figure out if there's a way that would make sense to say this. For instance, when she had that moment by herself about Cloud and like, why am I assuming he's unhappy? I haven't asked him how he feels. That's an arrogant thought. Oh, I must know what's better than him. That is one thing I really, when other characters try to tell Cloud how he feels, that bothers. Just as a Cloud fan, that annoys me. So I like that Tifa.
I think you're supposed to be annoyed by it though. Like, I think you're supposed to imagine yourself as Cloud and him being annoyed by it.
Yeah, I mean that's how I feel. Yeah, I'm like, you don't know me, like. I mean, she knows better anyway, which I think is why she recognizes, like, hey, he never said he was unhappy, so why am I taking it as that? And then in here, I like that Zangan, because for instance, I think it comes out later than these chapters, that her response to losing her friends in Midgard to see it as a rival was a bit of a childish response. She eventually comes to realize, I believe, partially through, through his training. And so this is like the beginnings. He's trying to teach her, and you see this as a thing throughout martial arts movies and things like that, where it's not about being the best fighter. It's not about, it's about being able to protect yourself. And a lot of, I'm just talking about movie tropes. I don't know. I've never been in a martial arts club. I'm not I'm not speaking for all that. But you get what I'm saying. Like they teach their students humbleness. They teach their students patience and things like that. So I see that. I see this part as him calling out things that she might be thinking or feeling, and saying, you don't even know yourself. So certainly don't judge others based on just because you may be learning from me. You may be the only one who's learning to do these fighting techniques. You may turn out to be a world martial artist, but, don't let that get to your head type deal.
Yeah, no, that's very much how it actually is. Like, that's what they say. It's not like they're not setting you up to be Muhammad Ali, where you say you're the greatest. Like, they're setting you up to like you say, be able to defend yourself in, when the circumstance arises.
Mm-hmm. Roll on the Floor says Zangan was calling out Cloud a little bit too, in a foreshadowing way. Yeah, I mean, he doesn't know Cloud, but yeah, I get what you're saying too. More of a bit of a dramatic irony for the player. Things that you might transfer into other characters for sure. Monk, you got anything on this particular part? We're nearing the end. We're getting to the last pages. Monk. Once she gets back.
I just find it kind of. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Hello?
We can hear you.
Okay. All right. So I just find it kind of amusing how mistakes Zangan for a human trafficker, and she just like she's doing so well with the practicing and everything until she starts suspecting that, and then she like shuts down and she's like, okay, I'm not cooperating with this guy anymore. You get to see a little bit of that stubbornness and a little bit of she has a little bit of an attitude, which I love. And you get to see a little bit of that too in Crisis Core, where she like stomps her foot. What she doesn't realize is Cloud. She thinks it's just some Shinra grunt getting in her way. But when Cloud prevents her from going into the reactor, she just kind of stomps and like turns around a little bit.
Yes. She had a little
I'm sorry, I
feistiness
find
to
it
her.
cute.
Yeah, she had a little feistiness to her for sure. I mean, she still does. I distinctly remember her. I distinctly remember a certain attack she did on poor Johnny in Chapter 3 when he was about to start blabbing about Avalanche. So she still got that spiciness to her. No, don't let the kindness fool you.
Or not even that. The time when she threatened to like
Oh.
beat Conair by smashing his balls to pieces. I mean,
yes. So
you don't really beat that, and the thing is, she could.
Oh, absolutely.
Like she did her best.
That's not a challenge I would take. Absolutely, she could. All right. To finish this up, let's see. So why Tifa? Okay, so this is where she starts teaching the villagers. While they're Zangan's gone and they don't necessarily want to be involved with him, they still like his techniques and would like to learn them. They call them longevity techniques, something like that in there. And so she starts getting paid 6 gil an hour to teach the villagers some exercises basically. What's interesting is here, so to the traditional village women, they start talking about let's see. Oh, they start talking about Monami, which is one of the elders that she's teaching these techniques to. She starts talking about how Brian and Thea, how Brian never left the village. He wanted Thea to himself type thing. But then they start talking about Cloud's mom, and they said to the traditional Nibelheim women, she seemed pretty unconventional. We all refused to accept her ways, but secretly we felt the same. Even though we scolded her, deep down inside we were cheering her on. We even felt jealous of her for carving out her own path. Perhaps she changed something in us little by little. And that goes right to what I had been suspecting. Like, you got a single woman raising a kid in a village like this. There's got to be gossip. And then, the stories, because you got a game of telephone going on as to what happened to Cloud's dad. Why did she never try to remarry? So that was interesting. I like just all the real world stuff they touch on. I mean, touching into sex trafficking. The fact that Tifa would be thinking about is this guy a sex trafficker is crazy. But it actually goes into the more mature stuff that you start seeing when they get to Midgar.
Yeah, it's also because Final Fantasy VII is the first one that they set in like a modern-ish kind of setting, really.
Mm-hmm.
So they had to they had to incorporate a lot of things. Like, if you look in the earlier Final Fantasy games, it's like, they're ostensibly set in like a medieval kind of setting, but then you look at it and it's like, okay, it's medieval, yet the women have way too many rights for this to be a real medieval setting.
Yeah.
It's good. I'm glad they do that, but they don't have to like follow as many like real world things in those settings as they did with 7. So they bring in a lot of things to make the world seem more believable.
Yeah, for sure. There's so many
Like,
realistic themes. Yeah.
Yeah, even the whole thing with Shinra and corporatism and environmentalism, like there's just a ton of like real world themes that in 7 they touch on it in a way that's kind of close to reality, but in 5 they had a whole environmentalism theme, but it was told through crystals. It had nothing to do with like there's literally a big corporation that are building all these reactors and that's destroying the planet. No, in Final Fantasy V was, oh, actually, it's, there's a crystal, and if we put on this machine to use too much power from the crystal, then the crystal will break.
Yeah.
Like, so they do it more realistically in 7.
Oh, definitely for sure. Though, I mean, they have got to retcon that thing with Barrett. Just Barrett's going on to sell oil. I mean, that is crazy. I was like,
I know, right?
what in
That
the
was
world?
that was the point. That was the point in On the Way to a Smile where I stopped reading because I was just like, seriously? Like, it's not even just the fact that he starts selling oil. It's the fact that, like, before that, he's like, oh, but can't we use a little bit of Mako energy? I'm like, didn't you just have this whole campaign about not using Mako energy anymore? It's just like, big man.
It made
What
no
were you thinking?
sense. It made no sense.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. But, and then, so they talk about why Claudia, even though she wanted to leave the town, decided not to. Says because she fell in love. She must have been taken in by that outside air he brought with him, and he was a pretty fellow. I'm sure you see it when you look at Cloud. That boy got the best of both of his parents. But just like the wind, he couldn't keep still. Not sure if Cloud learned how to walk yet, but around the time he told her he would go to the mountains, but he never came back. They found his belongings, though. His body probably got eaten by monsters. You were lucky you didn't meet the same fate. And she's talking about the Nibelheim incident. I'm not buying this story. I'm sorry. So he goes into the woods. All his belongings are there. There's no blood. There's no body. He is not dead. Okay, I am not believing it. I've seen this in so many detective cop shows. I'm telling you that man is alive.
He is not alive. You know why? Because he never shows up again anywhere years after the fact. If he was alive, he would have popped up at some point.
Why? Why would maybe he left on purpose? Look, and Hawaii.
Cloud and company go traipsing all over the world. They would have bumped into him if he was somewhere. And what purpose would him being alive be? What purpose would that serve the story?
I don't know yet. But if they wanted him to be dead, they'd have made it like Thea, where he had a body that was buried somewhere.
I think they wanted to leave some element of mystery to it.
You don't say.
Also want it, and they mystery as in how he died, not if he died.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well,
and
right.
I do think that it's supposed to play into just how dangerous the mountains are, which plays into, maybe Cloud's nervousness about Tifa going up into the mountains by herself, because he knows firsthand how dangerous it is because he lost his father up there.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now, I certainly agree with that. But yeah, all right. So, look, 20 years from now, when I'm proven right, okay, I'm coming to find you.
Okay, and I'll cut it a little bit shorter than that, and I'll say maybe about 6 or 7 years from now, when I'm proven right, I'll be coming for you.
Okay. Well, okay, all right.
I'll hold you both to that.
What'd you say? And so then, now this part, speaking of the sex trafficking thing, because the topics they discussed surprised Tifa and sometimes hurt her too. Talking about the people that she was teaching all this stuff to. She disliked whenever they brought up how her body looked so grown. Now she's between 13 and she's like 14 and 15 now. There appears to be an error in the book. It says she just turned 13 after Cloud left. That can't be the case. Because everything says Cloud was 14 when he left when he made the promise and left the village. She is only 9 months behind him. She would have had to be turning 14, not 13. So that and I talked to Peko about this, and it appears that the book does actually say 13. So I'm wondering if that's going to be fixed, but I just want to throw that out there because I didn't mention that. But if you're reading through this with the rest of us, you might have noticed that. I believe it's an error in the book.
Yeah,
I can't say 100% certainty, but yeah. Now, so she's saying that the villagers now are talking about how grown she is. Now, I don't know that they're meaning this in any. I don't know what they because who are we talking about? Men, women? Are they saying, you know, oh, she's looking, you know, she's looking like a proper young lady. She's marrying age. I mean, I don't know what the context is really here. She doesn't really go into it. She just says that it makes her uncomfortable. But I think the reason they bring this up is the same reason they bring up how she turns away the advances of Emilio and things like that, is because she doesn't like the attention of the boys and the men. So this is another misconception that Nojima seems to be dispelling, is that she is craving male attention all the time, which she is not.
That's very like consistent with how she is throughout. Like, you know, they made a whole point of it in Baron's resolution that, like, you know, about all the guys from Avalanche that she turned down over the years. So that's very consistent. She doesn't appear to have any romantic interest in anyone other than seemingly Cloud, obviously.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think he's just wanting to dispel any rumors like just because she wears a skirt and has a midriff, that means she's sleeping with half of Midgar or something like. Because these are things that people disingenuously say about her.
She's a martial artist. You try performing those somersault moves in an outfit like that. You try it. You know, you can't do it. It can't be done.
I've never personally seen a martial artist dressed like a nun. So, yeah, I mean,
like, you know, that was the whole reasoning behind changing the outfit in 7 Remake, is to make it more realistic for the kind of moves pulling off. You know, that's why, like, they say, okay, well, the original mini skirt probably wouldn't fit her, so we'll just give her this other skirt, but we'll give her leggings instead. And they're like, okay, well, we'll need to give her a sports bra if she's, you know, doing all these flips and turns and whatever all the time. You know, that was the whole reasoning behind that, was to make it more realistic. But
yeah, and I don't know. I mean, again, I find this hard to be a coincidence. Her top, the white black combo that she has, that's the exact same thing, because you notice they retcon Cloud's outfit at the water tower. I think he's actually wearing a black top and jeans or something like that. He's wearing something different, I think. But either way, what's in remake, he's wearing a white top with a black top under it. She's wearing the exact same combination of, you know, other than a midriff. She's wearing the exact same combination.
Yeah, that's interesting. I actually never thought of that before, but yes, that is correct. He's wearing white and black in remake. The image up right now.
And if it was just a coincidence, I'm sure I have 100 pictures, but if it was just a coincidence, I'll pull it up. If it was just a coincidence, I mean, the thing is, because they already have so many matching outfits, like, it's hard to ignore that. When somebody pointed it out, I was like, man, it's kind of true. All right, so we of course know this is what Tifa's wearing. Oh wait, can you?
Yeah, in the original version of it, he was just wearing white with jeans.
Yeah.
Like, but in remake, they have it so he's wearing like black and white kind of thing.
Yeah. So of course we know Tifa's outfit. What's changed is in OG she was not wearing that undershirt. She was wearing that black undershirt. She was just wearing a white top. But see if I can get an image. But you can see here he is wearing a similar. It's not the exact same. Obviously, he's not wearing a midriff at 14. But I'm just saying. Can you imagine? But yeah. And then what goes on from there? We're almost done. Let's see. So yeah, villagers kind of make her uncomfortable. I just thought that was interesting. I think that's what we were talking about earlier, is that they try to drive home that she really isn't looking for that type of attention. And then Emilio writes her a letter, and he's basically like, oh, you know, whenever I get discouraged, I think about you, Tifa, and then I imagine the day when I'll come and get you. And she finds that to be very arrogant of him to assume that she needs rescuing. So the next time she sees Zangan, she didn't like the idea of being rescued. Next time she sees Zangan, she brings up the letter and she's asking to basically go to the next level with him as far as learning how to fight. And she says, I think it's because I don't want to lose. I don't want to lose to anyone who left the village. She thinks of that letter kind of made her snap a bit, like, do you think you're better than me because you made it out of here? And so Zangan's like, hey, this is, I'm not going to teach you this stuff just to make you feel like you're better than other people. Again, dealing with that young hubris, that young arrogance. This is her working through that because she's a teenager. I mean, she's fallible. We were all dumb at 14, so I know I was. I'm just saying. And then I also, because we mentioned the cats before, just one thing I mentioned, she says to Zangan as he's doing some of the techniques, he looks like a cat. He says, right, that's there's a lot we can learn from cats. They mention cats a lot. I just thought that was curious. And then the last thing that happens is
He was a cat lover, I think.
yeah. And then the last thing happens is she goes home. He says, Zangan says to say hello to your father for me. As she stood in front of her house, she could smell the scent of spices in the air, spices that her mother liked to use in her best recipe. It was her father's favorite dish, but since Tifa didn't really like it, it was hardly ever served at the dinner table. She opened the door and said, I'm home. Welcome back. Her father, dressed in an apron, picked out from the kitchen. This smell, huh? Is it Mom's? I was really craving it. Oh, but I made something else for you. She was filled with remorse. She didn't like the way he looked or the tone of voice when he used when trying to gauge her mood. But it was all her fault for making it that way. So Mark mentioned this earlier. And I'll let you give your thoughts. Well, I think what she's saying is her father realizes she doesn't, it was rarely served because she didn't like it. So he's craving it. It's something that reminds him of Thea, and he's craving it. He hadn't had it in a long time. But then there's like probably a solace in his voice, like, oh, but I made you something else. Don't worry, you don't have to eat this. I don't know why it made her feel bad. I mean, it's just like around her mom and then her dad. I'm not reading too much into it, but that seems like what's going to, like, she feels bad that her dad had to make 2 meals because she didn't want to eat, or he felt that she wouldn't eat what he spent so much time making. I don't really know if it means any more than that, honestly, but Monk, you specifically brought this up. Did you have any thoughts on it? That's the end.
I'm sorry. Go ahead and repeat that last part.
Yeah, I was just saying, you mentioned the thing about Brian making a meal and there being like some tension between them about it.
Yeah. I felt it was a little strange. I was thinking it was probably Brian's own personal way of maybe like mourning his wife, but he didn't like include Tifa with it because he made the meal for himself and then he made something separate for Tifa.
Yeah,
because Tifa came into the house smelling that scent of her mother's cooking, and her dad said that, oh yeah, I was just making something for myself. I'll make you something else. Yeah. Which I felt was a little strange. And then Tifa mentioned something about, this look that her dad gives her and that she doesn't like it.
Yeah. Well, he says, it does say here, though, that it was her father's favorite dish, but since Tifa didn't really like it, it was hardly ever served at the dining table. So I think that's
right.
I think that's what the exchange is about. Oh, I made you something else so you wouldn't have to eat this. And for some reason, it makes her feel guilty that he had to make 2 different meals or something. I don't know. I mean, it's around her mom, some sort of weird feelings around that. Yeah.
Yeah. It creates like a little bit of contention there.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, that's the first 50 pages. I thought it was important to especially address those first 25, 30 pages because of so many misconceptions around Tifa's character. And it's a deep opening that they start with. It's not like it's not like Tifa's relaying all this stuff she's thinking about Cloud and stuff to Barrett, Red 13, and Aerith. But as she's talking to them, all these emotions are flooding. Probably ones that I wouldn't say buried, but things she just really hasn't had to think about until Cloud came back into her life. You know, she's been busy surviving day to day and dealing with the avalanche stuff. You see these moments later in the book where suddenly she hears something or sees something and she has a flash of Cloud again, and she tries to suppress the feelings, you know, because she don't know she's ever going to see him again. So now that Cloud is back in her life, I think she's just going through a lot of emotions because she isn't happy during this book. It doesn't appear to me. She seems contemplative. She seems a little bit solemn. Yeah, that's my impression of her throughout this book. But definitely in these chapters, I think it was really important in a good way to start off the book by starting with tying in Cloud, tying in their childhood, and they do go into the childhood stuff later too, I believe. So yeah, what did you think about these pages, Joe?
Oh, I mean, I'm honestly like, I'm really happy with what Najima did with this book, just because, like, you know, there's so much about that specific time period that we just don't really know a lot about. Like, you know, there's a lot of blanks that he filled in. Like, you know, from the original, all we basically know is, like, you know, she was outgoing when she was, like, you know, really, really young. Then Thea died, and then all of a sudden she became much more introverted, because of course she would. And then, you know, there was the accident at the mountain, and then, like, you know, we basically only know, like, tiny little bits. Like, there's small little things about, you know, what she was going through at that time. But now, you know, you just learn loads about it, and loads about the things that kind of, like, shape her into the person she is in, like, in the time of Final Fantasy VII. Because, like, I mean, what a lot of people say is, like, oh, you know, like, her personality seems like kind of a mismatch from, you know, the way her appearance is, and, you know, the fact that she's a martial artist, and her fighting style is to get right up in your face and beat the shit out of you, you know. Yeah, so I think it's really, like, you know, I think it's really cool that we get to see, like, you know, more of an insight into as to why that is, because we already had kind of the answer for that. The answer is basically, you know, she's someone who is mostly affected by all the losses that she's encountered in her life. Like, that's kind of the theme of every character in this game, is that, you know, they was this certain way, and then they suffered a huge loss, and that changed them massively, and they processed that loss in a different way. And, you know, like, Tifa's, the way she processed it is, like, has always been super interesting to me, because, you know, on the one hand, she's, like, you know, really, she has a part of Barrett in her where she's really driven by revenge at Shinra, and she's really driven by that. But then she has another part of, you know, she already kind of felt before the Nibelheim incident, she kind of felt that loss before with her own mother, and she was a lot more withdrawn after that, you know, where, like, you know, there's a part of her that wants to, like, bomb the crap out of Midgar, and then there's another part that's like, if I bomb the crap out of Midgar, I'm just creating more little girls like me. You know, like, I'm creating more little girls like me who've just had their family taken from them and their home burned down. And, you know, I mean, I always found that aspect of the character to be, like, extremely compelling and extremely fascinating. Like, you know, so I'm just glad that we get to see more of that part of the book filled in, you know, like, more of that, like, more of the reason of how she got this way, you know. And, you know, you get to see all the interactions she had with people back then, and, you know, the relationships she had with people back then, and how, you know, a lot of it is very consistent with what she is like when she's part of Avalanche much later. You know, like, you know, I pointed out the fact that, like, she's always, like, receiving a lot of romantic advances and always turning them down. Like, you know, just little details like that are just, like, really consistent throughout. So I'm really happy with what Nojima's done with this book, at least so far.
Yeah, and and you can tell it mattered to him to write, because again, they have plenty to do over there. They got plenty of things to work on. It reminds me of an interview that he did around the time of around the time this game was of course being developed and things like that. And in fact, he talks about feeling like the cloud that we see is like the cloud he always kind of wanted in remake. And
Yeah.
but he mentions he wants there to be little room for interpretation this time. So I think whatever they can't fit in the game, they're going to try to fit into DLCs. They're going to try to fit into Ultimanias, and then into books like this. I think, you know, as a man in his late 50s, he's seeing his legacy at this point, and he wants to kind of go out with a bang. I'm not gonna like nothing's gonna happen to him. I'm just saying, like, you know, getting towards retirement age. We don't know when he plans, you know, but I think he sees, maybe even sees this as one of his last big. All the devs really might see this as one of their last big projects, but even beyond that, Final Fantasy VII is a huge part of the legacy of the Final Fantasy series. So yeah, they want to do it.
Yeah.
In fact, I believe Monk said they weren't even going to do it unless they could do it the way they wanted to. And so
Yeah.
we're seeing their vision, you know, their true vision for the series unfolding. It's great. Monk, you got any thoughts about these pages? You know, just overalls.
Other than just saying that this is by far what my favorite novel written by Nojima, and this first part of the book is honestly so well written, and especially considering the timing of this novel, because we're not supposed to know exactly everything that happened, because I mean this novel is coming out before like the rest of like Rebirth and onward is. So I mean, I think Nojima is being careful about revealing too much, because there are certain things that are supposed to be revealed later on.
Mm-hmm.
So he's very careful to kind of mask those specific moments, and also he's telling things from her point of view, so there's certain things that she just doesn't know about yet, so they're just kind of presented in kind of a vague way where you don't really know what exactly happened from her point of view.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it also goes and clarifies a lot of things about her childhood that were previously unknown. I mean, basically the only glimpse into Cloud and Tifa's childhood is just in the live stream scene,
Yeah.
and really not a whole lot is revealed
Mm-hmm.
just from the OG alone. So this offers a brand new view, and a whole bunch is revealed about her mother, which we didn't even know her name before. We're told about Cloud's father. I mean, there's a whole bunch of new information that's shared in just this small portion of the novel, and it's done so well, and I was riveted. Honestly, it's a really good novel, and it's one that I enjoy rereading.
Yeah, yeah. I'm. That's, you know, that's why I wanted us to do this book club, because even for the people who've read it before, it's just nice to read through it again and remember just how much new information we got, and how many things were clarified. And I mean, we're only 1/4 through Tifa's part of this novel, so there's a whole lot more to go. And at this point, I would definitely argue Tifa is the most. We know the most about Tifa's life at this point. I would say even beyond Cloud. She is the most. Not only this, but we have her perspectives in the other books as well. So there's a lot of they over the years they have just added more and more to Tifa's lore and her character. So
And you know, that's like kind of hilarious to me in a way, because like in the original game, she arguably had the least, right? Which is because she was such a late addition to that game. Well, okay, fine. Vincent had less, but you know, that's like whatever. But like, you know, because she was such a late addition to the game, like, you know, she had like, okay, yeah, she has the live stream moment, but that's a moment when you're kind of focusing on Cloud at that point, right?
yeah.
So there were just a lot of people who would walk away from that game and be like, "Oh yeah, she didn't have backstory. She didn't have this, that, and the other." And it's like, no, she did. She had plenty of it. You know, it was a time you had to kind of like look for it. Whereas now, you know, we don't even need to say like you have to look for it anymore. We can just say, "Here it is. It's right here." You know, you read this novel. There's tons of it. you know.
Yeah.
So I think it's great to me how, how far we've come in that way. I think it's something that Najima definitely looks back on as probably as like a mistake of the fact that, the arguably most popular character in the game, aside from maybe Sephiroth, had the least amount of backstory. So I think it's a good bit of course correction that we've done there.
Yeah. All right. All right. Well, this was great. There was a lot of juicy stuff in here. Yeah, I had a lot of fun. Last thing I'm gonna ask you, Joe, is what are your thoughts about Crisis Core Reunion? I mean, we just got huge news about Reunion and Rebirth. Any just general thoughts?
I mean, well, my thoughts on the fact we're getting it, or like the trailer we've got.
I mean, just first impressions, I guess. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think Crisis Core is probably the best spin-off in the whole 7 series, honestly.
Yes.
Like, I think, like, okay, that, like, it's not perfect. No game is perfect, but, that has such a beautiful story with Zack, and, seeing his conclusion. Like, I understand, like, one little point of contention with, like, his, like, the way they did his last stand, like, it kind of deliberately wasn't dramatized in the original, and it is in Crisis Core, so I understand why people feel that way, but I ultimately feel like that game delivered more than it didn't, personally. I thought it was pretty solid, and Reunion, the version of it, I'm happy with it. Like, I'm happy with how it looks so far. It looks like a much more substantial graphical improvement than I would have imagined. Like, I'll tell you, like, it's funny because you'll watch back on, like, the stream that, like, the FFWiki did around the time of, the 25th anniversary announcement. It's so funny because, I had this whole pre-stream rant of, like, you guys are just expecting too much of Square Enix because, they have let us down time and time again when it comes to trailers specifically. Like, I was expecting them to maybe have the title for 7 Remake 2, now named 7 Rebirth. I was expecting maybe the title, but we weren't going to get a trailer. I was thinking, like, we're definitely not getting any Crisis Core. Like, that's just not happening. It's good. Well, like, they only mean that it's going to be an Ever Crisis, and, it's not coming to Steam. And then basically every prediction I had for that turned out to be exactly wrong in, like, a good way. So I was thrilled by the announcement. I'm thrilled to get the chance to play through it on modern consoles.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess, I don't know if you were looking for any other thoughts on it.
Oh, no, you're good.
Okay, yeah, no, those are my thoughts so far. And, yeah, I think Zack is a terrific character, and I think, for the most part, what Crisis Core added to the lore, I think it added way more good than bad, personally.
I agree. And it seems to be just like how they want to make sure to trace the 2 passes out in English before, ahead of Rebirth, to make sure that the NA audiences also are able to read it for themselves. The fact that Crisis Core Reunion, they wanted to come out a year before Rebirth, that says a lot to me too. They want to make sure people know, even if it doesn't all turn out completely continuous to the original Crisis Core, they want people to know that story. They want people to know that lore.
Yeah,
and
absolutely. Same deal with why we're getting Ever Crisis, but maybe they realize somewhere down the line of, like, okay, I mean, Ever Crisis is good, it's a great thing we're doing here, but not everyone's gonna want to play a mobile game.
Yeah.
Or we don't know if it looks like it might be a gacha game, we're not sure, but they'll understandably be like, we did this on Kingdom Hearts and people weren't very happy with this, so let's actually just release Crisis Core properly. Yeah. But yeah, no, I agree with you absolutely that it does definitely say a lot that we are getting it, and the fact that it's named Reunion is also kind of interesting to me. Like, because you would think of Reunion as, like, the name of, like, 7R Part 3 or something.
Exactly.
the fact that they reserved that name for Crisis Core does, that's kind of interesting. I think it would be really, really funny if we go through the whole Crisis Core reunion and it's exactly like the original up until the very last scene where Zack survives. That would just be hilarious to me. I
Yeah,
don't think that's gonna happen,
you know
but it would be
everybody's
so.
thinking it though. I mean, a lot of people are theorizing that's exactly what's going to happen. I don't know what
Yeah,
to think
imagine,
about the
like,
title.
yeah, imagine if they did that. Imagine if it's exactly the same game up until that one moment, and then you're just like, wait, what? That would just be so funny to me.
Yeah.
I would probably just burst out laughing.
All right. Well, this has been great. Anybody want to, if you all want to introduce what you got going on, or, if you just want to say your goodbyes, I think we'll end it here. Had a great discussion. I put it, by the way, Roll on the Floor, thank you for the 5 subs. Really appreciate that. I put it in the comment section, but it is Cloudy Events that is hosting this event, ran by TifaTheMonk, and myself. This particular event. We also have Tanabata and Nibelheim event coming up Thursday. That is Thursday, right? Yeah. Okay.
Very excited for that. Very excited for that.
Yes. And me personally, we'll be doing this book club every week. We'll try to be more consistent with the time. I mean, not the 3 of them. I'm saying I will be doing it, and whoever wants to join me, including people in the audience. If you ever want to join, just hit me up in advance, and we'll get it set up that way. But it will be either way. It will be every Tuesday, somewhere after I get off of work, basically. I get off at 5, so I'll try to give times in advance, at least a day in advance, so you all know exactly when. Generally, it would probably be between, I don't know, 6 and 7, honestly. So, all right, but yeah, that's it going on for me. Joe, I don't know if you have anything else you want to say, or want to tell people what you do.
As was kind of hinted to, I wrote most of the 7 content on the wiki now. Still in the process of doing that. It's a big game, so there's a lot to do, and there's a lot of spin-offs to write about eventually. So definitely when Crisis Core comes out, like that whole section, I'm probably gonna rewrite it all. But yeah, right now I'm a little busy with Final Fantasy VI, which has taken me longer than it should have to rewrite around all of that. But when I'm done with that, I'll probably have like a month or two's break before I'm back to rewriting all the 7 content. Yeah, I mean that's kind of all I do in this fandom, just because it takes up all my time. like so I don't really have anything else going on aside from occasion, when I get invited to podcasts, it's like, great, this is a lot of fun. It's a break from what I normally do. So,
well, that's great. That's great.
it's like I work full time. I get off at 5, and then I'm at the gym for 2 hours. So it's like I don't have a lot else to do in my day, because there aren't so many hours I have after that. But
I hear you.
yeah, that's kind of what's going on. It's not much. It's just check the website. If you notice one day that a page looks better than it did the day before, it was probably me.
Okay.
Cool.
Cool.
It's Final Fantasy VII. There's other people work on other different parts of the site, but I'm kind of the main writer there. We have a couple others who do a really good job as well, but I do it for most of the main characters, basically, and most of the main events and that kind of stuff.
Cool. That's awesome. Yeah, I've been following Final Fantasy Wiki for years, as far as the actual pages, so the wiki itself. So it's an excellent source for trying to find certain information for sure. Monk,
we appreciate your patronage, even though we don't get paid. We appreciate your page views.
Yes. Monk, you got anything else? Any outro?
No, just to be sure to check out our Tanabata and time event again, starting on the 7th, and it's 5 days. So be sure to check the at Claudia's Twitter account.
Claudia Vest. Okay.
Our pinned tweet has all the details and the prompts. And yes, I will try to be here every Tuesday. Usually I work at the office on Tuesdays, so I should be available to join in the discussion,
Okay.
especially for Tracy's. I want to make sure that I'm for all of Tracy's the two pass and on the way.
Yeah.
That one has a.
Yeah.
I really love
You
this
broke
one.
up a little, but she was saying she's gonna try to join every Tuesday along with me. So, and
Yeah.
it's particularly for Tracy to pass it on the way to a smile. So, yeah, that
Hey,
is good.
I'm so sorry. Can I just answer this one thing in chat real
Yeah.
quick?
Yeah. Yeah. You're fine.
Just one thing that came up, like I just like because that's such a huge compliment to me to read that the Tifa's personality section because like it did take me a really long time to figure that out. Like that was like, and I'm really proud of it as well. Like the whole page because that took me like I can't tell you how many hours I spent poring over how to write all of that because like I like Tifa's personality is so fascinating and it's always been so funny to me that you have this whole section of the fan base who's like, oh, she's not that interesting, she doesn't have a whole lot going on. Like it was really hard to figure out how to write that in 4 paragraphs. And I pored over it for a long time to figure out how to write so much in so little space
Yeah.
and to like condense it but also make it accurate and to capture all the different aspects of why it makes her the way she is and why she's always just been such a compelling character to me. So that's one of the biggest compliments I can receive as an editor. So thank you very much for that because it did take me a long ass time to get it right.
Well,
I'm
Red
really
Flare,
proud.
you made his day. So.
Really did, like dead ass. You made my day with that. Like so
That's
thank
awesome.
you. Really appreciate that.
He said respect. All right. Well, on that happy note, we'll as Tifa said in chapter 3, we'll end on here. I really appreciate Joe and TifaTheMonk for joining me, and I'll see you next week. Y'all have a good one.
Thanks.
This is Stygian Stilettos Gamer, and I am # out of here, honey.